Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Prime Pediatric Podcast. I am super excited and late today. You guys know I get super fired up when I get good guests on. And when I've got great guests, I get even more fired up. I have Dr. Grant Dennis from Arkansas on the day, the upper cervical extraordinaire, the TATS guy. Dr. Grant, how are you doing? And it's so awesome to have you here, man.
Hey, I'm doing great, Skip. I appreciate you having me on. I love your energy. Anytime Skip Weiss comes calling for me to help him do anything, I'm in there. Yeah, it's just finished up a morning and checking patients, man, and absolutely. I think it's real cliche. A lot of people say living the dream. I truly am living a dream every single day. This time of year, patients coming in, bringing gifts, bringing things, showing their appreciation for the work that chiropractic does in their lives over their nerve systems. And when innate intelligence flows through their body, we know what that leads to. And so, man, I couldn't be more happy to be here with you.
Man, I love it. And dude, you hit on it right away. You all have heard me talk about this nonstop. Did you guys catch what Dr. Grant just said? He said he'd spent his entire morning checking patients, not adjusting spines, not moving atlases, not checking, like he was checking patients. And that's why people come in. And if you want to separate the wheat from the chaff, okay, I'm a farm kid at some point. I just kind of know that. But if you want to separate that, you're checking patients versus adjusting them. And you want to get on that pain-based model of just treating pain, you're checking. You're not adjusting, you're checking, man. And that innate intelligence has to run at 100%. And Dr. Grant, I love the fact that you're on here. Let's dive into your past. Some of my viewers and some of my listeners don't know who you are, and they need to. So can you give us a little highlights of the Dr. Grant Dennis past and just yeah.
Yeah. So, my past is, it's always funny when people ask that. I'm the oldest of four brothers. So I grew up in a highly crazy, volatile household of boys. My mom was outnumbered. And so inherently at a young age, I realized that being the oldest of four brothers, I just naturally was drawn into this provider type of personality. I just enjoyed providing. I enjoyed providing results. I enjoyed providing for my wife and our future family and my parents now that they're older than me. But chiropractic sort of found me. It truly called me to the profession. I grew up in a medically oriented household. I didn't go to chiropractors when I was a kid. My parents didn't take me. We were very medically oriented, and so I always just thought I'd be a medical doctor. I played college baseball, was a receiver in high school. I always used my hands and always felt like I had a good set of hands on me when it came to doing, playing infield or playing receiver in high school. And so I always thought, okay, I'll just use my hands and use my gifts God gave me to be some sort of surgeon or dentist or something. And I always knew I wanted to use my hands. And so I was actually on my way to med school, was a couple of weeks out, and I kept having this weird intuition tell me, don't do it. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. This isn't right for you. So I went on a whim and visited Parker University. I got teamed up with Dr. Gene Giggleman, who is a legend in our profession. He's who innovated animal chiropractic. He's who did my tour at Parker University, and I left Parker University that weekend and said, this is where I'm coming to school. So I went home, told my parents. They were like, Grant, are you sure about this? Let's sit down and talk about this. Are you thinking this through? Do you know how difficult it is to go to med school? I said, this is just my calling. It's what I'm supposed to do. So I went to Parker University, didn't know a soul, packed up, moved down, got a 1-bedroom apartment with a recliner, a TV, and a bed. And I was in a long distance relationship. It was very difficult, but I find that you grow the most, and this, Skip, and I'm sure your viewers do too. And if they don't, they'll figure it out. Is that you grow the most during your most uncomfortable times.
Yes, sir.
And I found out who I was. I found out a little bit about what makes Grant Dennis tick. And along the way, I found the green books. I found a passion for the artistry of upper cervical work, which led me to the art of the specific. And then at the art of the specific, I learned from Dr. Shondale and Dr. Andy Roberts as a student. I now have the fortunate opportunity of teaching that work as a doctor. And so now I get to teach other students. And so that led me and sprungboarded me into practice, opened my own office right out of school, grew it very, very quickly doing the knee, chest, upper cervical work, and then started recognizing how important it was to support other things in chiropractic. One of the things I find, Skip, that's really strange is chiropractors wonder why they don't do well financially. And it's because what I find is those doctors don't support chiropractic. And so why should chiropractic support you in return? And so one of the things that I found early on was that the more I supported chiropractic, sorry, my motion light, since the light there went off. What I found was the more I started supporting chiropractic as the president of the International Federation of Chiropractors and Organizations internationally. Then I started supporting at the state level with the ACPA, which is the association that I am currently on the board of now. And then I started supporting it by teaching the art of the specific to students. And I just immersed myself in the principle and started supporting financially. And if you're one of those that can't support financially, it's fine. Just support with your resource and your time. But what I found is the more and more that I supported chiropractic, the more and more it supported me in return and sent me people that needed to be taken care of, and which ultimately we know leads to funds and leads to things like that. And so that's kind of me, where I'm at now. I also get to serve as the C.O.O of the specific chiropractic centers, which is currently at 14 offices around the U.S. And so I could go on and on about that kind of stuff, but I think just in a nutshell, that brings us to present. But what I think's super that important that I've realized here of late is chiropractic is just what I do. It's not who I am. Who I am is a man of faith, man of family, who just happens to be given a skill set that understands how important when you unlock innate intelligence in people, it results in outcomes that it results in, and I get to see that every day, just like you. So,
dude, you knocked it out of the park with that, because it's all about the universe and how God's put us together, right? And dude, you were given a set of gifts and you knew exactly where you needed to be, and you listened to that. You listened to that innate intelligence. You listened to that Holy Spirit talking to you and saying, hey man, you need to go to Parker. You need to become a chiropractor. You need to become the best on earth. And that's specifically what you've become. And it's how it works, right? And I couldn't agree with you more as far as giving back to chiropractic to be successful. I remember when I first started in practice, man, I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. So what did I do? I gave back to chiropractic with teaching as many students as I could get my hands on pediatric work. And I started mentoring as many students and going to as many colleges as I could to just give back as much as I possibly could. And again, if you don't have the monetary means to give back to schools, you have time and you have talents. And if you can give your talents and give your resources in that way, you're still giving back, and chiropractic will reward you time in and time out for your service. And we've talked about this in the past, and maybe we should jump in on this. Is, there's this thing floating around chiropractic. It's been floating around for years, is the broken broke chiropractor. And it's not cool if you're successful. We obviously do illegal shit, Grant, if we're successful, right? And I can tell you right now, I have a 85% cash-based practice. We have a small amount of insurance that we still have not completely gone away from because of Medicaid, but we've cut everything out as far as all new work. And I'll tell you right now, I have never been fraudulent on anything in my life. And it's because I constantly give back to chiropractic. And I love the fact that you said that, because there's a lot of docs that don't give back, and your community sees it. The docs see it, but more importantly, the community sees it. Because I guarantee you, Grant, you get young docs coming to shadow you all the time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We had all the time. And the young docs who come in and preceptorships eventually become associates, and yeah, I think. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think that your community, your patients, when they come in, when they see you, they talk to you, they see these students there, they're like, oh, smack, like this guy actually he's legit, because he's got students driving down to see him, driving up to see him. Man, when students come from Palmer, they're driving 5 hours in the morning to get here by 8, and they leave at like 3. And they're here, they're caffeinated all day, and then they want to get in their car and go home. Like, you're ridiculous. But the patients see that, our practice members see that. And we were talking previous to this, Grant, and this is a pediatric podcast, and you were talking a lot about this earlier, but you do see a lot of kids, and you see probably in the 20-25 percentile of children. And why is that? Why do kids just trickle in? I mean, you're not pediatric focused.
Yeah, no, not at all. In fact, when I came out of school, I had the fortune of being mentored under Dr. Sean Dale, who said, be really, really pay a lot of attention to who your ideal client, your target market is. And kids, still to this day, is not one of them. I take care of really, really sick people, much like what was in the BJ Palmer Research Clinic, people who come in with debilitating neurological conditions that honestly just don't dispose the clinic environment to a kid atmosphere, or so I thought anyway. And so what I started noticing was that as I was, I don't like the word educate, but I like the word empower. As I was empowering, these people who were sick, that the importance of having your nerve system checked, and the importance of the analysis that we do, and that, you know, chiropractic's not for everybody, but it is for those who we find are candidates for this type of care, which we know are a large majority of people. And so as parents became under care and as these patients started seeing results, they were like, how do I get my kids under care? How do I get my kids checked? Because we know that parents put the utmost, you know, amount of emphasis in their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were like, you know, hey, if I bring my, you know, my child, will you check them? And I found something in practice early on that I found that was very interesting is I would tell them not all children should be adjusted, but all of them should be checked, much like pediatricians check your child for certain things, and they don't always find things wrong with them. And in fact, most parents want to know if there's something wrong with their child,
Yes, they do.
even at the slightest little thing. You know, well, how can my child have an edge? You know,
Mhm.
so what I found was that I just said, hey, bring it, you know, bring him or her in, and I'll run some fossa readings. I'll do a little bit of an analysis, and if they need to be adjusted, we'll adjust them. And
Mhm.
so in the art of the specific, we utilize computerized infrared thermography, and we use fossa readings. And if their neck's big enough, we can. There's actually pediatric scanners that they make,
Yes, there are.
that we have. And so, you know, I just started running scans, taking fossa readings, and there's nothing cooler than having a mom or a dad under care at the same time that their child is. And because if you truly empower them to understand that they want a better outcome for their child than they had for themselves when it comes to their health, then the earlier we can check and correct this problem, the better outcome they're going to have. But I think one thing that I've noticed is that when the, in my opinion, I get asked this sometimes, well, how come more parents don't bring their kids to chiropractors? I think first and foremost, the perception by them has been ingrained in them, whether you like it or not. They've been indoctrinated to think the adjustment is not safe. So for their child, indoctrination into their head, they think my child should never get this because it's not safe. It's okay for me, but it's not safe for them. And so what I tell them is, listen, this is very much safe. And the reason that it's safe is because it's only done when and where needed. And it may not be needed.
And extremely specifically.
Yeah, it's listen, like we're gonna check them. And if they need an intervention, we're gonna give it to them. And then there's gonna be subsequent days that come in, they don't need intervention. So what's cool is, I mean, I have kids hold adjustments 6, 8, 9 months, sometimes a year. And parents get that. What I just don't think what they get a lot of times is every child should be adjusted and always adjusted. In their view and in their head, I just don't think that computes. And so inherently, just by using that mindset, that philosophy, that empowerment type of, I guess, approach and practice, what it led to was more and more and more and more parents bringing their kids in. They bring them in anyway. So I'm like, hey, you're bringing your child in anyway. Let's check them. And they're like, check them. Like, yeah. So we're going to empower you to understand the importance of that. And then what happens is they just bring them. The kids enjoy it. The kids like it. Just because we're knee chest providers doesn't mean we adjust kids knee chest. Like you know, you can place a child on the chest and turn the head left or right, use a very soft contact. No more, you know, people always say no more pressure, and you put on the eye, and it's true. But yeah, I just think if you're empowering people correctly, it should lead inherently to more kids coming into your office. Um, what it also leads, there's two metrics I kind of look at, especially just now that I have associate doctors. I tell them all the time, the way you know you're doing it correctly is when you turn one patient into two and two into three. Like you don't need to market. Like you just bring them in, tell them the story, empower them, tell them the big idea. They're going to refer somebody internally, whether it's their spouse or their significant other, but then also their kid. Like
Mhm.
that's going to happen inherently if you're doing it correctly. If you're not, it's a good insight and a good indicator that you're not telling the message clearly and coherently enough. It's just a good metric internally to look at within your office to see if you're kind of communicating effectively. And if you're not seeing that, then plug into groups that can help you communicate that correctly, because that truly I've found in, you know, now 7 going on 8 years is how you build a practice with the right types of people.
Heck yeah, man. It's a huge thing. And I just look at it as just a little bit different than you, Grant, from an age perspective. I turn kids into adults. So I'm seeing these kids come in, and I would say that I see probably 30% adults, 70% children. But I look at it just as an inverse in the exact same way. One, checking everybody, but how do I turn one child into two? Then I see a family, and I go up the line, and eventually I see grandma and grandpa. Okay. And it's how it works. And what I firmly believe, and we need to get the population of the United States and the world to understand this, is that we are innately, inherently wired to protect our nervous system because it runs everything about us. So what happens is when we start getting adults under care and they start feeling the differences of what it's like to have a fully communicating nerve system, they innately want that for the people around them, because energetically, physiologically, they run different. They will run at a higher cell vibration. We know this. They need everybody up in that vibration. And if not, they will not heal appropriately. So the entire commune is a big situation there. It's a big thing. And Grant, I know you know this because I've heard you talk and I've heard you get real passionate about this at times. So when you go into this and you talk, let's talk a little bit about the story. Because now what I mean is I know the story you give and stuff at your new patient talks and stuff like that. But let's go from a different perspective on that as far as when you say the story, what do you mean by that, Grant? Because
Yeah.
there's some docs that don't get the story.
Yeah, I know. And it's super sad. And I see that more and more, by the way. There's really
Yes,
only
we
a
do.
handful of schools that left that teach the story, for those who don't know and are led to believe otherwise. Is there's really only 2 or 3 schools. We know the fountainhead today is Sherman College Chiropractic. And there's a couple others, LifeView and Life West, who are kind of holding on to our roots a little bit. The rest are kind of gone, as far as teaching the story and telling the story and how to communicate that. But essentially, the story is very simple. BJ called it the big idea. Um, and then he said, give them the big idea or teach them the big idea, and all else follows.
Yes,
And in
sir.
my view, I tell people when they come into our office, for the most part, I always usually start with one thing. Do you understand how chiropractic works? And a lot of times people say, no, I don't. That's why we haven't reached 90% of the population, is because they don't know the answer to that
But
question. How does
apparently,
chiropractic work?
according to some Rasmussen studies that have been funded by prestigious chiropractic universities, over
Right.
80% of the American population has seen a chiropractor. Yet, in my mind, that doesn't mean anything.
No, no.
So, sorry, not to interrupt you, but
Yeah, no,
you
it's
follow me.
yeah, it's like every other statistic in the US currently. I'm not sure how much I trust them. But yeah, so and here's the thing is, like, I start with that question because to me it really illustrates and gives me a starting point to understand where they are. A lot of chiropractic, mentors, gurus, coaches will tell you you need to bring the patient where you are, or you need to go to meet people where they are. I think you need to bring people to you.
And
And
you
so I
come to
think
your level.
they just need to I can't leave where I am to come to you. I have to bring you to me, or else this relationship's not going to work. And so a lot of times I'll just say, hey, do you know how chiropractic works and the premise behind it? What makes it unique and different? People say, no, I'm not. No, I don't. I say, okay, so for me, it's very simple. Let me break this down to you simply. When you were born, your body was designed to heal. I believe this crazy thing that your body is designed to heal. Healing occurs by brain to body communication over the nerve system through your body. The biggest thing and the most detrimental thing that can interfere with your innate ability to heal that you were born with through your nerve system is when a bone misaligns out of its proper position and interferes with your nervous system's ability to communicate. My job as a chiropractor is to locate where that misalignment is in your skeletal system and remove it through an adjustment, remove the subluxation, which is what we call it, the nerve interference to your body, and allow your body to heal naturally. And it's that simple. What do you think about that? And they go, well, that makes perfect sense. Like, where do we start? And I say, great. So
Does make
we're
sense.
going to take some, much like an EKG measures the function of the heart and an EEG measures the function of the brain, the technology that I use measures the function of your nerve system. We're going to run that today, and we're going to identify whether or not this is the type of care you need. What I find, and if I find what I think I'm going to find, is that the large majority of people who have chronic unresolved issues are candidates for this. Fortunate enough for you, here's the data that shows that you definitely are. So what I need to do is take some specific x-rays. What I've found is that the upper bone in your neck has come out of its proper alignment. It's causing that interference to your nerve system, and through an adjustment, we can restore that and watch your body heal over the next 4 to 6 months. How's that sound? It's going to cost around $4,000. We can break that up into all kinds of affordable care plan options for you to make that affordable. How's that sound? Sound fair enough? And 95 to 90% of people say, yeah, I mean, why am I just now hearing about this? Why did nobody send me here sooner? And then you do have it's very few and far between the longer you practice and the better you communicate and the right people you bring in your office. But there are some that say, okay, well, what about different things that arise? And then you got to have some, I don't like calling them sales conversations. I like calling them discovery conversations. Like, let's just figure out, like, is it the timing that's not right? Because if the timing's not right for your commitment, it doesn't change the fact you're still a candidate. It just means that it's just not the right time for you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find is just most people are open to that. Like, yeah, I mean, I just want to invest the time when I can. But large majority of people are like, where do I get started? What are our options? What do we do? And so I think when you talk about the big idea in the story, it's just no more simpler than that. I think a lot of times in our educated brains, we try to instill and sell people. Um, but oftentimes they'll come in. I just feel like the problem is here. And I'm like, you're right, it is. And here's what's going on, and make it make sense to them in simplest terms as possible. When I wrote a book, Tucker Max said something that was really instrumental for me in that process. And I went into that process to write a book thinking I'm here to write a book. And what I actually realized was I was there to communicate, to learn how to communicate to people through a vehicle like a book. But what he told me is you should talk to 95% of people at the fourth grade level. And I was like,
yeah, dude,
that's
yes.
interesting. And he was like, I don't care if it's a neurosurgeon, talk to him at the fourth grade level. And then when they ask you to come up, then come up. But what most people do is they talk at a collegiate postgraduate level, and then they never see the opportunity to come down. Or you're talking down on people that you don't need to be talking down on, and you just always start at this level, and I can always move up. But what I can't do is start high and move down, because now I have a confused buyer. So that's just when you say like the big idea of the story. I think that's something simply most people can use. um, and then it just comes down to what objective analysis do you particularly use, whether it's leg links, thermography, HRV, ASCMG, whatever it is. You just need to make sure that your philosophy is clear, which is what I just kind of broke down. Your science is there to validate it, and then your artistry is just sort of how you blend that. It's sort of how you, whether you use AO, knee chest, Thompson, Gonstead, your technique is your artistry, but your philosophy and science is sort of the stool that supports it. And I've just found that the more and more you're congruent with those three tenets, the better you do financially, the better you do as a business, first and foremost. Because what I find is the reason most people don't support chiropractic is they say, oh well, when I get money, then I will. And that's why you won't ever get there, is because the very thing your business thrives upon is the principle of chiropractic, whether you believe it or not. If you have DC on your degree, that's what is allowing you to do that through your scope of practice, which somebody went to jail for at some point. So it's time you take it more sacred, and chiropractic will bring you a lot more financial return. I have no doubt.
I love that, man. I like when I have to do podcasts and I don't have to talk. I love it.
I
I'll
got a
tell
little
you,
bit of a sore throat today, but man, I'm a talker, and I try
you
not to
nailed
be,
it,
but
Grant.
it's
Like
just once I get going.
I love letting you roll, and I didn't want to interrupt you. And I feel that me and you are on the same wavelength. I think that's why me and you click really, really well. And we're innately wired. You trust you're innate. Like we talk to our patients all the time. I can't give this recommendation more and more to people is trust the innate in your body. If you're clear and your nervous system's clear, you're going to communicate amazingly well. And you're going to be able to communicate at a very, very easy level. And then if you understand chiropractic and the philosophy so well that you can communicate it easily, you're finally where you need to be. And if you feel that you need to over explain chiropractic to someone to get them to commit to care, you're basically moving them down the road of something that's going to go in the wrong direction. We don't need to convince people. We just need to tell them what's up, what's going on, what our intent is. And our intent is not to fix anything. Our intent is to remove interference so the body heals. And they understand that. And what's funny is when you give them the easy story, like Dr. Grant just said, they are innately wired, like I said before, to protect their nervous system. And it clicks. As soon as their brain hears it, it's like, damn, finally heard the message that I've been waiting for you to hear for 35 years. Now fix this, please. Because I've been getting nonstop interrupted feedback for 35 years from my body telling me that something is wrong. Please get me back into communication. And it just clicks. And like you said, it's a timing issue. When patients don't commit, it's generally either timing or finances. If it's finances, there's ways to work with that. Sometimes there's not, and that's okay. They can wait. The other side of it is timing, and sometimes timing just isn't right. Then they wait. There's still a candidate. And I think if you guys go back and listen to that past 7 minutes of what Dr. Grant had talked about, that will alone explode your practice as long as you are taking it in the right principle. The most successful chiropractic offices still to this date in United States history are subluxation-based chiropractic offices. The most successful, the most happy, the ones that aren't worried about going bankrupt in 5 years. And if you set with that amazing foundation and principle, that's where we should be at. Now, hey, Dr. Grant, tell us about this book, because you mentioned it a little bit. You worked with Tucker Max. And I know that you wrote a book based on headaches and migraines. And can you walk me through what this book's all about? Because I firmly believe that all chiros should read this book.
Yeah, yeah. So I was inspired actually to write it by a few of my clients. Honestly, that's where the inspiration came from. I had a client who was driving 2.5 hours each way. There was a close family friend that was in a really bad place when it comes to migraines. She came under care, told her the story and the big idea. She got under care. She got well. And I wasn't surprised by that. That's another thing too, is we shouldn't be surprised by the results we see in our office, because miracles only happen if you don't expect them. Like it's one of those things where it's like, you're going to get well. It's going to take time. I'm not sure how much time, but you're going to get well. And she did. And she came in and said, Dr. Grant, you need to get this message to more people, because had I not found this place, I wouldn't be alive today. She
Mm-hmm.
said, you need to get that message out there. And I said, okay, well, what do you mean? And she said, I think you need to write a book. And I said, wow, okay, so no pressure. Now I have to write a book. I can't just not heed the advice of my client who just told me your life wouldn't be the same. So I said, okay, I'm gonna have to write a book. So I remembered about 2 weeks later after that, I went to summer camp and Tucker Max spoke at summer camp. And somebody asked the question, they said, how do we as chiropractors take the message to the masses? And he said, I know I'm biased, but every single person in this room needs to write a book. There was 2 people in that audience that wrote books, Sean Dill and myself. And I don't know, there may have been 1 or 2 more, but those are the ones I remember. And I was like, it's interesting that he literally gave it to us. He was like, this is what you need to do, is you all need to write books. He's like, I'm challenging you all to write books. I said, okay, so that's 2 different people now in the last 2 weeks who've challenged me to write a book. So I said, I'm going to sign up. I signed up, and it was very uncomfortable at the time for me spending what I spent to go through that process with Tucker and write that book. And anyways, I was sitting in the room with him, and I told him, I said, I'm trying to spread the message of this little known thing called chiropractic that gets sick people well. And he said, well, what are your clients looking for? And I said, they're looking for a life without migraines. He goes, well, that's the title of your book. So that's where the title of the book came from. I wrote the book. It took me about a year. It got released in August of 2020, right during the middle of the pandemic when everybody was sitting at home reading. It went to an Amazon bestseller. I use it as a loss leader in my community and as a gift to people to help them understand. And I can't tell you how many people opt in for that book, read it, and then about a month or 2 later decide to start care. It literally helps people. It pushes them over the edge to start care a lot of times, because what I try to do through the book process to help them gain trust and credibility in chiropractic, and that what we do is backed by science. What we do sees results, and we're not surprised by them. But also, it gives them some foolproof ways to identify people who are acting under the premise of chiropractic that are not practicing chiropractic, because that's very important to me. Because I think it's one of the biggest things that's hindering us is people who are doing things that are not chiropractic under the pretense of chiropractic. And so what it did is it's flooded me with more migraine people. I can't tell you also how many people across the country I get the pleasure of referring to docs around the world through that book that they read, and they're like, who's near me? And I find them and connect them. And honestly, that's my truest joy from that book, that I've found is the biggest thing that's happened from it, is doctors in Wisconsin, Minnesota, London, England, Australia, they find the book, they read it, and they reach out via email, and they're like, who's near me? And I'm able to connect them with people. That's the coolest thing about it, honestly. And so if you're someone out there, and by the way, everybody has a book in them, every single person, and especially chiropractors. And it's just a really good way to get your message out. Use it as a loss leader through your website, through funneling, opt in, get my free book, send them your address, shoot it over into the mail, or they can pick it up in office. Most people choose to pick it up in office, of course, but if they're remote, I just send it to them. But man, it's really opened the doors. Like BJ used to use the WOC radio. Today, I think the chiropractor uses a book. I think that's a really good way to market, advertise the message, and get it to people in a mass type of generalization way.
Hell yeah, dude. I couldn't agree with you more. The way books are consumed now, audiobooks are the same way. And the WOC, like people, that's the thing about BJ Palmer is, I mean, I've known more about BJ Palmer than most people, being that I went to Palmer College Chiropractic. I was a campus guide. I had to learn so much chiropractic history to understand to give one of the best tours that school has ever seen, man. And understanding what BJ did, what he went through, how he was a thought leader, but more importantly, how he was a marketing leader for chiropractic, and buying a radio station, using AM radio, sending his message all the way across the world. And what did he do it? He did it on timing. He did it at night when everybody's around their radio. And now everybody's around books. Everybody's consuming podcasts. I use podcasts. This is my WOC, except it's PPP.
Right.
Like
Right.
but this is what I use. And the thing is, though, is you're 100% correct, Grant. Every chiro should write a book for their community. Every chiro should have some form of podcast or YouTube channel educating the public, because guess what? That stuff's free and you can use it. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars and buy a radio station. You can get on here and just start building your listener audience and start doing it this way. And you're doing it through a book. And I'm going to challenge you to start a podcast. I'm going to challenge you to start a podcast or a YouTube channel, Grant, and get on there. And if you don't have it yet, you need to do it, brother, because your message is crazy and the way you deliver it is absolutely top notch and brilliant. And I love your book. So what's the name of that book? It's Life Without Migraines?
Yeah, it's A Life Without Migraines, a little and holistic method to living a headache-free life. And so that little holistic known method we know is chiropractic, and so that's where that sucks them in. They read it and they're like, "Oh, chiropractic!" Nah. And then immediately in the beginning of the book, I start to tear apart those objections and those preconceived indoctrinations, and eventually people call and they're like, "I read it; it just makes sense. I need to get in. Who do I see?"
Start killing those sacred cows and showing them the safety of it, man.
That's it.
The biggest thing is I look at it too, is in the pediatric world, Grant, we can talk safety because you're an upper cervical guy. Like I know you are. And it's like working in the art of the specific with Dr. Dill and Dr. Book and Dr. Grant is understanding the safety of the adjustment and how safe it actually is, and how when we're doing what we're doing properly, checking and analyzing the spine. Now, mind you, the public that's listening to this, because I have a lot of patients that listen to this, is awesome. When we check you, we are doing multiple things at one time, checking your nerve system and also checking and making sure that that adjustment that's going to happen on that day is the appropriate right and time to make it happen. And when we do that, that's when innate takes off, and the true brilliance of your body shows up. And it's amazing. And I'll tell you, man, listening to you here, I've been talking to my wife, Dr. Julie, for over a year about writing a book, and I'm going to do it now that you said it. I'm like, okay, that's another sign that it has to happen. And if I want to do more like Grant Dennis, trust me, I'm going to write a damn book.
I know if I know you well enough, I know that you will.
Yeah, I'm going to write a book.
That's it. Well, I mean, it's to do. You're a doer, so and I'm going to have to do a podcast now.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So, Grant, man, this has been an absolute awesome interview. I love talking to you, and I love talking to docs about true chiropractic and checking the nerve system, because that's what we do with kids. And if you want an extremely successful office, both children and adult alike, it starts with the check and the balance of the nervous system. It doesn't start with the headache. It doesn't start with the back pain. But like Grant said, the public is looking for relief for symptoms. But once we get them and we can change that paradigm, we're going to change the world. And I know Dr. Grant's doing that. And I truly appreciate you, brother. I know how hard you work, and I appreciate you allowing me to stand on your shoulders and keep propping me up as well, because that's what we need to do. And we need to see everybody at the top working together, man. That is absolutely key. How do my listeners get a hold of you, Dr. Grant?
Yeah, I'm super easy. The best way is probably just to find me on Facebook, Grant Dennis, or on Instagram, Dr. Grant Dennis. Shoot me a DM, or you can just shoot me an email at grant@thespecific.com. Or you can just go to my website, drgrantdennis.com. Start to see the branding. It's Dr. Grant Dennis. I have three first names, so I always have to lay them out the right way. So it's Dr. Grant Dennis on Instagram or our website, or just reach out to me on Facebook. It's the easiest way, and I'd love to help any of your viewers or listeners in any way I can. But thanks for having me on.
You are very, very welcome. Real quickly before we jump off, Dr. Grant, they can also find you with the I.F.C.O, correct?
Yes. Yep. The I.F.C.O. It's one of my honestly greatest honors in the profession, is to serve as president over the last 3 years now of that organization. And that organization has one sole mission and vision and purpose, and it's to guard the sacred trust, to make sure that everything we just discussed is readily and available for doctors to be able to practice in their offices. But most importantly, if any patients are watching this, your ability to receive that type of care, super important to me, super important to our initiative and our mission. We're the only international organization I'm aware of that's their sole mission and vision. And so, we also can have patients that are supporters. They can support at a very low fee per year. Obviously, doctors can support as members. But man, it's one of my greatest honors that I get to do year in and year out. It's the greatest work that I put forward that I don't get, like returned financially for. But man, I shouldn't say that. I do every single day when I practice, but It's one of those things that we talk about: resources, your treasures, your gifts. That's one of my greatest ones I get to contribute to.
Well, thank you for doing that. And that I.F.C.O organization is very, very special to chiropractic. And I can't tell you thank enough for leading that organization for 3 years. So
Most
Dr.
people don't
Grant,
know, Skip, that it was actually started by Reggie Gold. Most
I
people don't know that. Yeah, it was
he's
actually
the
started
man.
by Reggie Gold.
I had
Yep.
a chance to
So it's
listen.
carried on to today.
I had a chance to listen to Reggie Gold live in person at my halfway party at Palmer College of Chiropractic.
Mm.
Dr. Ian Bulow and Dr. Trom Melchowski got
Yep.
Reggie to come up and speak. So we were sitting there 10 feet from that man, and he let it rip for 45 minutes. And most of the docs in that room had no idea what this guy was talking about. And I listened with intent, I listened with purpose, and I was blown away by that man. It was such an honor to get a chance to actually listen to that man in person.
It's awesome, dude. That's why your class was a power class. I
Yeah,
mean,
oh, for
because
real, man. That
I mean,
yes, it is.
I mean, you get to, not many people got to hear that message. And so looking back at some of our FS, it used to be the F.S.C.O. and now it's the I.F.C.O. But he started that as an organization, as important as it is still this day. But yeah, I get to hear some of his stuff. Man, to be able to hear it in person, good for you, man. That's why you
Man,
are who you are today. It's a small piece.
just lit it up, and I was blown away. I was actually the first time I had heard him, and I'm like, man, this dude's British. What? Like you see him walk around, and you're like, what? And then you hear his voice, and you're like, whoa, okay, I know exactly who this is. And and he
Did he
was
have the big chops?
no, he was bald.
Bald? Yeah.
Yep,
End
yep.
stage of life. Yep.
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 Love
Good
Reggie
stuff,
Gold.
man.
Man, this is what it's all about. So, Dr. Dennis, thank you so much for being on. Y'all go out there, listen to this man, find Dr. Grant, listen to him as much as possible, and just get into what he's doing. If you need any more information on the art of the specific or anything like that, you reach out to him as well. Dr. Grant, thank you so much for coming by. Now, everybody, go out there, get it done. Bye.